Welcome to Interior Analysis. I'm Evan Westman,
I'm Jelani Kelly.
and today we are talking about Godzilla versus King Kong, and we're joined again by Ahsan Naazim.
How's everybody doing?
We are also joined by David Jones.
What's up? I'm glad to be here.
Yep, good to have both of you. So this just came out in theaters and HBO Max. I'm pretty sure we all saw it streaming. I don't think anyone was able to make it to the theater.
Ahsan, you did though.
Yeah, I actually saw it in IMAX. That was my first time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was my first time doing IMAX too. It was pretty cool.
Wow. That probably was a lot different than and I don't want to speak for anyone else's,
man.
but
Did it feel like they were in the theater with you?
It really did, man. Godzilla sat up right next to me and got popcorn there. But the sound was incredible. I'll get into that later on though. But yeah, it was a really big part of like immersing with the film.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, because this was definitely made like for a big theater experience. Like, I think it probably translated fine for most people watching at home, but I think I could feel when I was watching I was missing some stuff. So glad we're able to get that theater experience voice at least somewhat. Real quick before we like jump into this, I just want to like run through what have we all seen, what other movies with either of these two characters. David, let's start with you.
From this universe, I have seen Kong Skull Island, which briefly I was underwhelmed by. I saw about half of Godzilla King of the Monsters, but I didn't see the original Godzilla with Bryan Cranston. And then just every other Kong movie ever made.
Mm-hmm.
How many is that approximately?
I think there's 3 others.
It was like the black and white, and there was one in like
There's the 30s, the 70s, and then
Yeah.
Peter Jackson's in 2005.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Son, what about you?
I've seen the Peter Jackson King Kong Skull Island. I saw one of the original King Kongs. I don't remember what it was. I was very young. Don't have much recollection of that. And then for Godzilla, I've seen the Godzilla movie that came out. I think it was 2003. I forget. It was like in the early 2000s. And I saw Godzilla 2014 King of Monsters. 2014 Godzilla is probably my favorite movie out of this whole entire universe, in my personal opinion. I wouldn't consider myself a huge kaiju fan, but I definitely like Godzilla, I like King Kong. I played the games too, like really like the characters and stuff like that.
Games.
Yeah, there was like a Godzilla like melee game where it had like Ghidorah, Godzilla, Rodan, all like these monsters like in the movies, like the older movies. They had like a melee game. It was like you run around the city destroying everything, fighting. A lot of them were in the
Sounds like
movie too.
Rampage.
It was really fun. Yeah, exactly. It was like 3D. It was really cool. And then there's like King Kong game on PS2, which was like phenomenal. So
I've seen all from this verse except for the 2014 one where he was barely in it for like 5 minutes, I heard. And I saw it, but I don't remember King of the Monsters. I think Mothra was in it or something. That's about all I remember. I've seen all of the King Kong movies. And I've seen the original Kong versus Godzilla. I think there was only one before this where King Kong was like able to get powered by like electricity lines or some BS, and he won in that movie, which annoyed me. And I've seen some other old Godzilla stuff with like from like Japan and all that, but it was dubbed over.
Yeah, my only two for either of these, I've been like, aware of the other ones, but the only movies with them I've actually seen in their entirety are Skull Island and King of the Monsters, which I only saw in the past month to just get caught up for this. My only real takeaway from them was like, and this is probably not most people's, but pretty on brand for me, I now just think of Ken Watanabe's character as like, I just think of that now as like my headcanon for what Saito was doing in Limbo before Cobb showed up. Like,
Damn it, Evan.
I had to. That was where my mind went. So now I'm just like, that's what's happening in like the third to last minute of Inception in my mind now. All right, let's get into our initial reactions.
I had watched the trailer for the initial reaction, and I was very excited just because it looked like, after having not movies for a while, just give me spectacle, and I was just going to eat it up. Like, I was like, I don't care what's happening on screen, I just need something on screen. And that looked cool. And when I watched the movie, the one thing I was noticed from the trailer, I was like, if they turn this into they team up together because really there's a big bad that isn't one of them, and together they could defeat that. I was going to be a little annoyed, but also it's a movie monster or a monster movie coming out in 2021, so I figured that's the route it was going to go, and it did go that route. And I wasn't bitter about it because I assumed it was going to happen, but it did leave me just being like, all right, well, I'm going to forget about this in 5 years, probably a month. So,
Anything else you want to, like, specific moments you want to call out?
oh, there's a
Get
lot
into
that
anything in.
we'll get into, but one thing I really appreciated was the little nod to the original Universal King Kong ride, where you were in like a cable car and he would like shake you and his eyes would come up and there would be like one eye, and they have that moment where he like pulls the Hevo or whatever and like checks to make sure all of no one in there matters, then he blows it up, and that's like a little nod to that frame, and I thought that was pretty cool.
Coming into the movie, my expectations were very, very mixed and low. I didn't like Godzilla King of the Monsters. I thought it was like visually it looked really cool, but I think we saw way too much of Godzilla for there to be very short and quick fight scenes. So the reason why I say that is because like in the 2014 movie, they kind of filmed it in a way of like a horror movie or thriller movie, where like you only see like his kneecap or you only see a little bit of him. So it was kind of like that mysterious element to him, and it made him very scary. And when they finally showed him in the fight scene, it felt like there was a really big payoff to seeing him. Even though it wasn't like that long of a fight scene, it felt like they were building up to it. Versus in like the sequel, it was you see Godzilla all the time, and he looked kind of smaller because you're always seeing him in frame. And the fight scenes were always like really quick scenes of him and Ghidorah punching and go right back to the humans. Like there wasn't really like a lot of shots where we stayed on them for long. And I didn't really like that. Wasn't really like enjoyable to me. But I thought it was a fun summer movie, you know. The one issue I had with that movie is that when Ghidorah woke up and he like brought out all the monsters, they teased this big catastrophe of just like problems that would occur from all these monsters coming out, only for them to just go away at the very end, and that was it. So like you tease all these monsters, but you never do anything with them, and like they're only shown in one shot, and like that's it. As far as Kong Skull Island, I thought it was a cool summer blockbuster at best. It was nowhere near the original, or I guess the Peter Jackson film, but I thought it was like a fun movie, but I wouldn't put it like in my top of anything, you know? So my expectations were very low. The director did Blair Witch and Death Note, so I didn't know how I was going to feel about it. But the screenplay writers, he did Agent Carter, Thor Ragnarok, and Black Widow. He rewrote Ant-Man, Spider-Man Homecoming, Pacific Rim Uprising, which I haven't seen,
Jesus.
Avengers Infinity War Endgame, and Detective Pikachu. Most of those movies I've seen, and I really liked them, so I had higher hopes knowing that. And the other guy who did the screenplay, he did the first Godzilla and all the other MonsterVerse movies. So I wasn't sure what I was going to expect. I really enjoyed how they made Kong bigger. Kong is typically like 25 feet. And you remember how like in the classic, he's always falling off the Empire State Building? To put that in like size comparison, if you remember in this movie, he like climbed the building and like hit around it to jump on top of Godzilla. Like, and he fell off that building without hurting himself. The original Kong would take a whole day to climb that exact building. And if he slipped and fell, he would die. So, like, that's, like, a size comparison. I liked how they really picked the winner. I was expecting it to be, like, a stalemate. And I was expecting them to pick the one choice that didn't make sense. And they picked the one that made the most sense. And I really liked that. Thought that was actually clever writing that I wasn't expecting in, like, a mainstream movie. I liked also how Godzilla kept using his atomic breath on Kong. He did not let up. Like, usually at, like, movies like this, they give plot armor to the person who's the underdog. So, like, in Batman vs. Superman, they always make Superman, like, not fly through him or use a laser vision. Like, he's always, like, walking up to him or doing things that he wouldn't normally do in a fight. I liked how they kept Godzilla, like, 100% always on the gas pedal at him. And I like how they both showed them on land and sea on both of their turfs. I like the little girl, Gia, the girl who was deaf. She really brought a humanizing element to Kong's character, and I really liked that dynamic. I liked Bernie Hayes. He was a really good comedic relief. Like, he had a lot of quotables. Like, I wanted to hear the rest of that speech, Tap Water. I wasn't sure I was going to like the comic part of this movie, but it definitely grew on me, and he was a really good actor. I know he's in Atlanta, and I got to watch that, but he's a great actor, so I enjoyed it. I saw it in IMAX, like I said, and the sound was a huge component to me enjoying this movie, which isn't really fair because if you're watching it on stream or you're watching it in a normal theater, it's not going to hit the same. Like in the IMAX, it was my first time there, so like I was hearing sound like behind me, around, on the left. Like when the jets come by, it would like zoom from the back of the theater to the front. Kind of like a 4D ride at like Universal or whatever. It really felt like that with the sound. And like when Godzilla and Kong were like screaming in their faces, like you really felt that impact. It honestly, the sound was such a huge component that I didn't think it was really gonna immerse me into the film. Because to me, it's just like sound. I always take visuals as a thing that's like gonna pull you into it, but really the sound did it for me. Cinematography was incredible. I love the rotating cameras, the tracking shots. I usually hate the zoom-ins, but I thought they were appropriate here, and they really kind of worked for me. There was a quote the director said. He said that like after he did this film, he feels like he knows now how to make a monster movie. Now he like has all these skills of how to work with characters and like do camera shots, and he wants to do another one. And he compared it to how Quentin Tarantino did The Hateful Eight after he worked on Django, because once he worked on Django, he just figured out how to do a Western movie, and like it clicked for him. So I'm curious to see if this director can do an even better job with the cinematography if he continues working on it. And then I'm almost done, but my dislikes, there's a good amount of them. The other human characters felt really unneeded. They weren't awful, but if Jason was not in this movie, nothing would change, minus the ending with like the alcohol pouring scene. The doctor, I think his name was Dr. Nathan or something like that. The guy in the beginning who like got the haircut and he had a beard that was recruited by Simmons. He makes very little addition to the plot. I mean, there's parts where he saves characters, obviously, and he's like the reason for like the inciting incident. But outside of that, he does not really a compelling character to me.
How do you remember any of their names?
Google.
I think of the same thing.
Google.
Me too.
I just called him like Paperboy 11 and the kid from Deadpool 2.
The blonde dude with the eyes. They could have avoided the whole first fight if they flew Kong by air. I thought that was kind of just like a dim-witted thought. They couldn't easily avoid it. Like they acknowledge the fact that they brought him by water, Godzilla will come, and they still did it. I don't think scientists or people with education would do that. I wanted
people died.
Yeah,
from that attack.
I wanted to see a tiny bit more fighting, but the fights were really incredible. The sound got me into it. The visuals were dope. But I wanted to see a little bit more because, like, this was the hyped up movie since 2014 when they did Godzilla and they announced that they were going to do this. I wanted there to be more of a stalemate before we saw a true winner. I thought the stalemate that we got in the last fight where Kong was starting to win, I kind of want to see a little bit more of that, but, you know, to each their own. Mechagodzilla was very short-lived, and it would be better if he was present throughout the film or another film more longer, because we only got to know his existence very late, and then it was very done, you know? And Ghidorah's head was used for Mechagodzilla, and there was not enough payoff from, like, the little teaser they left on the last movie. I didn't really enjoy that. Especially for those that are, like, invested in Godzilla's story, you know what they were going to do with Ghidorah's head. Like, they're going to make a Mecha Ghidorah, and I thought they were going to go that route, but it is what it is.
Real quick, I thought I think it was an AI they explained it as, but I thought it was Ghidorah's mind and Mechagodzilla's body. That's what I thought.
Exactly. Like, they combined, like, both the best of both worlds, and it didn't really, like, do it for me personally. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then the last few things I want to say, they really, really try to make Godzilla, like, a villain in this movie. And I don't know if that's inconsistent writing or just a different perspective. And the reason why I say that is because in the first Godzilla or the 2014 movie, when he came to land, he was like swimming in water. Anytime there was a ship, he would like swim underneath it and avoid like human casualties. When the humans were like lighting him up and shooting him, he would not fight back. He wouldn't kill anybody. He would just only focus on the monster. In this movie, like when he was going after Kong, the monster, he had no problem just like destroying ships, running through them, blowing things up. Obviously, when he attacked the humans in the beginning, he had no problem destroying everything. And to me, it's either like just inconsistent writing or just they're trying to prove a point that Godzilla's not a good guy. He's only after the apex predator. So humans to him are like ants, so to speak. So he's not going to ever fight back. And he's only after the apex predator, so he could be the apex. And then once he's an apex, he leaves everybody alone. Not because he cares for people, but just because that's what he chooses to do. That's the kind of vibe I got from him, but that was not explained or articulated in a way for me to like give them that credit. So I don't know if it's just inconsistent writing or just maybe misinterpretation on my part.
Okay. David, how about your like scenes you want to call out, anything like that?
Sure. And if anyone has any similar differing opinions, please jump into, because I would love to hear what everyone's thinking. But one thing I noticed that I enjoyed, because I did see the original from, like, the 60s when Godzilla and King Kong fought, and it's so, like, I love it because it's terrible, but I love kind of campy, cheesy things, so it's, like, that's the vibes. And, like, when you just see them just beating each other with trees, it's hysterical. But with this one, I appreciated the fact that like they fought like the animals they were. Like Godzilla would wrap himself around in like a lizard, and he would use his tail, and Kong acted more like a primate, and the way they would do the things that they would do. So that was really cool. But on the flip side of that, I agree. A lot of the characters, if not all of the characters, besides the little girl, it was like they weren't really necessary. And like the older woman was just like exposition to the audience on overdrive to like any scene that was happening with like visuals. And I was like, all right, this is fine, I guess. People need it explained, so it's cool. I know Millie Bobby Brown is famous, and I know she's in the last Godzilla, so like seeing her adds a certain consistency, but that whole side story like comic relief band that was just going around doing nothing, I was like, why is this girl, because I was trying to picture if I'm her and like I went through something with Godzilla in my youth and Godzilla was turning around and destroying Tokyo, would I like change everything in my life to pursue him? Like I just felt like her need and her drive wasn't enough. It was just like, well, here she is. I didn't really believe it. I was like, all right, I guess so. And then what's his name, Tapwater? Gosh, Tapwater. That's just what was the guy from the Goonies, Chunk or whatever?
Yeah.
That's Chunk 2021.
People were comparing that group to the Goonies.
Oh my
what
god.
I heard. That entire
I hadn't
trio.
thought of that.
Yeah, same.
That's all Tapwater was. Tapwater was just watered down Chunk, so that was that. And yeah, the ending. I'm a Kong fan, and I'm probably the only person I know who was on Team Kong when this trailer came out, because everyone was like, Godzilla's gonna kick his ass, atomic breath, blah.
Yep.
And I was like, yeah, I guess technically, if we're getting technical. But they had their definitive win without having to actually destroy each other. And I liked how they showed them, like, being apex controllers of their own worlds. Like, they gave Kong Hollow Earth, and then they gave Godzilla the surface world. I thought that was nice. It was like, alright, let's just agree to disagree.
Team Kong.
I am Team Kong.
Let's get it, bro.
What?
Yeah,
I'm Team Godzilla, bro. What?
Same.
I
I'm
think Godzilla would win, but I'm Team Kong, bro.
Yeah, that's the thing. I agree. I totally agree. And I think that's part of, like, I think Kong's the best character in this movie. I feel like he's the only one who has, like, a payoff or, like, an
Because
arc. Like, to me,
he has screen time. He like spends time with like the characters and becomes friends and stuff. Like
yeah, he has beats. Like, he speaks. He has his home.
Yeah.
He's no longer in a cage anymore.
Bro, he dropkicked
Yeah,
him.
they don't give that to
They completely
Godzilla.
bring Godzilla. No, Godzilla's a one-note evil force, but then at the end it's like, but is he really? Because Mechagodzilla, and it's just like, well, then what have we been doing this for?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go into my initial reactions. I'm skipping over some stuff I like mentioned in the beginning because more or less I was complaining for the first 40 minutes because I did not give a damn about what was going on screen. I really just wanted to see the fighting. I didn't need setup. I didn't need any of that. I just wanted to see them scrap. So it did take 40 minutes to get good, but once you hit that 40-minute mark, it just keeps ramping up. Also, Kong needed an axe to win his round, like that kind of semi-second round in the city. Yeah, because Godzilla was clapping him otherwise.
I'm curious, how do you guys feel about that choice? Because I like it, because it's like, he's a primate, they make tools, they use their
Absolutely.
brain.
It was cool, and I kind of called this moment when they were teaming up against Mechagodzilla. Like, what if Kong were to be mid-swing with the axe and Godzilla charge it while he was swinging? And that kind of happened, so that was really awesome. Even still, Godzilla all the way. I just thought of some visual things like Hollow Earth looks dope. Some of the actually, just most of the characters weren't even necessary. The little girl grew on me. Like, I can pinpoint the moment that she did. It was on the ship when she touched Kong's finger. And I was like, a cool-ass shot. I was like, all right, you got me. The girl's cool, but screw everybody else in this movie. The guy, once I saw him on screen, Walter Simmons, the CEO, evil guy, like, once I saw him on screen, I was like, this is very clear. He didn't even say anything. It was on, like, the advertisement. I was like, this is very clearly the bad guy of this movie.
Yep.
I was like, he looks like Lex Luthor combined with Deathstroke. Like, there's no way this guy is a good guy at all. And then, you know, his weird partner, the one that, like, mind-controlling Mechagodzilla is strange. But,
That was weird, right?
yeah.
Like,
when he
I didn't
ripped
need
the
any of that.
Skullcrawler in half, he's like, That's it. Like, like, bro, why are you taking like this is a test? Okay. It was still cool to like see Mechagodzilla split that thing in half with the laser breath, but still, the guy was strange. I thought for the time Mechagodzilla is on screen, I'm just mentioning points that you guys didn't already mention because I'm pretty much on board with everything that's been said so far, besides the whole being on Team Kong thing. I think Mechagodzilla was like really cool for the time he was on screen at the end because he was kicking ass when he was there. I was like, yo, this is so much more destruction because he's not trying. He was like Godzilla, but even more bad because he was very much destroying, like purposely trying to destroy the city. It's not like he wasn't caring about the destruction that was going around from him walking and all that. He was purposely doing that while also kicking Godzilla and Kong's ass simultaneously, and they needed to pour liquor on his motherboard or whatever in order to stop him. Like, he was a beast. Oh, and I really like, well, Hollow Earth just looked so damn cool. And then once Kong went to his home, and you like saw the pillars and saw how small he was compared to the pillars, and I was wondering, yo, okay, so if he's that small compared to the pillars in his home, what about the ships? And then they showed the ships, and I was like, okay, so what about the humans inside the ships? And they're just freaking dots on the screen compared to the whole thing. It was really cool to see. That's pretty much it for me.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not going to, like, contradict anything you guys said. I did feel pretty differently. Well, I don't know about, like, differently from everyone, but I think of the four of us, it sounds like I enjoyed this the least. So, I mean, on the whole, I got what I was expecting, but I was kind of underwhelmed. It didn't feel very inspired. I hear some of the points that were brought up. I forget exactly what they were, but I think David and Ahsan, you both mentioned a couple points of, like, stuff this did that was like smarter that surprised you. I didn't notice that, but now that I'm hearing it, I kind of agree. From when I was watching it, I just felt like I have seen all of this before. Everything in this felt, or not everything, but like most of it felt kind of derivative. There was like a one-to-one comparison I could do with a lot of things. Like we basically had, I agree Hollow Earth looks cool, but basically that's exactly Ice Age 3. Mechagodzilla is basically Doomsday from Batman versus Superman. You know, we had the shot of, like, I saw in the trailer, like, we had Kong with the axe. Like, it looked exactly like Thor going for the head in Infinity War. Then we've got the kaiju fighting robot from Pacific Rim. And any of those, like, on their own would be one thing. Like, nothing's completely original. All of them together just, it made me feel like they didn't try that hard with it. I don't want to diss on the people who made this too much, but I felt like it was a little uninspired was most of my reaction. But I think, like, hearing what you're saying, Ahsan, like, I'm sure I would like this more if I saw it in a theater. The fact that I saw it at home on my TV was, you know, I missed a lot, I'm sure.
I was going to ask if you watched on an iPod Touch or something.
No, I watched King of the Monsters on my computer, and I know I missed out on a lot. Like, I think as soon as I saw the trailer for that, I was like, this is something that, like, I will only appreciate if I see in theaters, and I didn't. Couple moments that I wanted to call out. This was one shot that I thought would have been really cool to have. We, like, half got it, but I wanted more. When Godzilla is wrecking the ships with his spine spikes thing, I really wanted them to have like a long take or like a longer shot, like a longer tracking shot where like we see him like going through the battleship all the way and we don't cut away, like the kind of like the plane crash in Tenet. It's not a spoiler, but like if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. I thought that would have been really cool. I did appreciate them setting up Hollow Earth in the other movies. You know, it didn't come out of nowhere. It was clear they at least had some kind of plan from the start of this series or, you know, crossover, whatever we want to call it. They were setting that up in, I don't know about the 2014 Godzilla, but I know there was some kind of establishment of that in both King of the Monsters and Skull Island. So I did appreciate that. Only other thing, and I don't know, like, how accurate or inaccurate this is, they were talking about teaching Kong sign. Rebecca Hall, her character, said that like she's been trying to teach him the alphabet. I am not an ASL expert. I do like teach myself a bit of ASL, but I just was thinking, and if anyone like knows otherwise, please feel free to correct me on this, like listeners and any of you here. Like, I feel like if Kong is probably, even if he's an intelligent animal, he's probably illiterate. I feel like starting with the alphabet wouldn't be the move. His sign, the only one I remember seeing him do is home, which is not like letter based. So
You should start with like learning colors or something.
well, even some of those are actually letter based. Like it'll be green is like partly the sign for G, but at least with American, there's other variations that I don't know anything about. You know, I've never taught sign to anyone. I'm not fluent, so I could be totally wrong about that. But it just seemed like, you know, if you're teaching a human versus teaching an animal that probably can't read and will never be able to talk, it feels like that's not the right approach. Probably a really small gripe. Also, other thing that it takes from ASL with monkeys was in Planet of the Apes.
Were
That's
you expecting
another
him to
thing
stand
it
up
stole
and say
from.
no at some point?
I'm glad that didn't happen. I do love that moment in Rise of the Planet of the Apes, though. That's a really cool scene.
I love that. Yeah.
When I say it's like derivative, it's not really knocking the movie. I mean, it is, but I'm more just disappointed that they didn't take a more original approach with it. The other thing, this isn't really something they stole from. I'm just kind of sick of the like Independence Day ensemble character thing. This is one of several movies that do it. This ensemble is a lot smaller than the Independence Day one, and maybe and people are going to be mad. I am not a fan of Independence Day. I know some people love that. The ensemble doesn't work for me because they're all one-note characters, and I feel like if you're going to give us characters, like, give us damn characters. Don't give us caricatures or stereotypes. I don't think any of these devolve into stereotypes, but I mean, we've already mentioned they're a little bland.
Oh, wasn't the father in the movie at some point? He was just making that signature worried face every scene he was in.
Oh, Kyle Chandler.
Yeah.
Yeah. I should actually say, though, I watched this. I was home for the weekend. I watched this with my 11-year-old sister, and she actually said she really liked the human characters. So I still didn't. And I was thinking about it after she said that. Like, I can see how, like, as a kid watching this, even if I was, like, 12, it might have been kind of cool to have, like, Millie Bobby Brown and Gia, like, the two kids who are kind of central to it. Like, I feel like that would have been kind of fun in, like, a YA novel sense to have that for, like, watching it as a kid. I still don't love either of those characters. I agree they're probably two of the better ones, but I did feel like that maybe was something that, like, younger audiences might have appreciated, that, like, we do kind of have, like, two kids at the center of this.
Also, side note, I was wondering how they were going to, because Kong in Skull Island was much smaller than he is in this movie, and I was wondering how they were going to fix that, and he just ended up being Godzilla's size in this movie. But I think I watched a podcast or something, and they said Kong Skull Island was set in the 70s, and he grew since then, since now it's modern times, so now he's Godzilla's size. So
Yeah, they said he was like a young teenager or something, like really young. I forgot what they said. They said he like really, like, pretty much the adolescence in Kong Skull Island. That was like the logic they used, because like they had like this plan from the get-go, supposedly.
I didn't notice the size difference, but I think I did hear about that. And, I don't mind. Let's get them on somewhat equal footing.
It makes sense, because if it's not, it would be like a wash.
Yeah, and I was wondering if anyone actually noticed it, because I had heard that was the case back when I watched Skull Island and just, like, anticipating it. And then when they introduce the first opening shots of, like, this is Kong's day-to-day routine, and I was like, all right, let's observe how big is he compared to the mountain. I was like, is he bigger? But then when we got to Home World or whatever, Home Earth, it was like, oh, okay, this mountain makes Kong look like a baby.
Right.
So now there's something at least happening. I agree with what you said, Evan, about how it borrows a lot from other films. I think one storyline slash like trope this film falls into that makes it so like eye rolly is the whole like ha ha ha, you led us to the source and now we will mine it. It's like I could list so many movies off. Immediately I was like
Avatar.
Atlantis Lost Empire.
Yeah, which is Avatar.
Yeah, Avatar,
Atlantis
Lost Empire. It's every movie ever where it's just like, we're going to mine your resources. Or Alien, you know, why did we really land here? Because we wanted the xenomorph. And it's like, okay, does any of this necessary? Like, you could have made this a 60-minute like WWE steel cage match and I would have been more entertained of just those two fighting than any of the actual emotional stuff they half-assed into the film.
Yes. So that's a good transition into a topic that I wanted us to get into with this, which is what makes a good monster movie. So Jelani and I mentioned, or at some point on a couple different episodes, I forget exactly which ones, we've like alluded to this movie and just said like, why don't they make it just like a boxing match, like you were just saying, David, like and I don't want to center around that for the whole topic, but I want to consider that, do we need to make a traditional movie around something like this moving forward? But I want to like generally center for a bit around this question, what makes a good monster movie?
I'm trying to think of like the good monster movies I've seen, because I haven't seen Pacific Rim. I saw Cloverfield, but I didn't think that was like the greatest movie either. So I'll compare it to what I liked about Godzilla 2014. By no means is the blueprint for every movie. I'm just spitballing here, but I like how, again, there's like a sense of mystery, but we kind of got to a reveal. Like Godzilla, like Jay kind of alluded to earlier, like you only see Godzilla for like 5 minutes, and when I was watching that film, it didn't really register that way, only because even though that's the reality, it's like they're constantly teasing him. Like you're always hearing him, you're always seeing some part of him on screen, and everything is always revolved around him. The big problem with that movie is they killed off a really important character very early on. I won't spoil it for those who want to see it, but that's probably the biggest issue I had with it. As far as a monster component, like they consistently tease Godzilla, and like you never see how tall, like because the camera is like always on like a kneecap or like up to his neck or up to his arm, like most of the shots you never see his whole body in camera. So what that does is it makes him seem bigger than he really is, and there's a consistent feeling of like just fear and like confusion and mystery. So I think that really, you felt like you were one of the humans who were like seeing Godzilla for the first time ever, and then at the very end you finally see him at the full scope, and it's like you get a big payoff and a big reveal. And it didn't really feel like a Fast and Furious movie. No disrespect to them, but it didn't feel like it didn't take away.
Disrespect.
It didn't really take away the allure of Godzilla. Like you felt like it was earned. Versus like in the second movie, it's like you always see him full bodied, always in frame. He looks smaller than life, not literally, but like he looks less important, and it takes away from like the fight itself because it's not special or earned, if that's making any sense. Like, when you do something consistently, you're always giving it to the audience. It doesn't make it feel like it's special because they're seeing it all the time. Versus in Godzilla, we barely saw him. So when we finally did see him and we finally saw him fight and use the atomic breath, it felt very special.
I think what you're talking about with, like, hiding Godzilla or any given monster, like, that's something that I've more heard about this than seen it, but, like, in some of the older monster or movies with monsters, I'll say, that I've seen, they do that where it's, like, you don't see the actual monster for most of the movie. You just see like a little bit of it. You see like a hand or just see the destruction it causes. And from what I can tell, I think that mostly comes from like, you know, that it's usually a budget thing, I think, where like they can't show like Jaws. Exactly.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, is Jaws a monster movie though? Because that was gonna be my point. Like by definition, is Jaws a monster movie?
It's like a slasher with a shark.
Right. I think that's a good question though, because like there's monster movies like this one, but there's also movies with a monster in it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know exactly what distinction we want to make with that.
This is more like kaiju monster movies. Where it's like...
I feel like I would put Jaws more in the camp of like it's a monster movie because it centers around him. Yeah, Predator would be a monster movie also, I think. But, like, A Quiet Place is maybe a movie with a monster in it.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. Maybe.
Okay.
I I could definitely hear arguments for either that, like, maybe some of the, we could switch categories with some of those, but, like, I think it is a distinction to make. I would consider all of the movies with Kong or Godzilla, I think those are all monster movies. But
So what would be like the difference between a monster movie and a horror movie? Is it how much you see of the monster during the movie? Or like I'm trying to compare
Or
this
what
to,
the monster is.
Yeah, I'm trying to compare this to like Alien or something.
I think that's hard to divorce because monster movies are born out of horror. Like, I feel like if you go back, it goes to Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and it's like, That's why there's also, like, a kind of sci-fi element to a lot of monster movies, too.
Okay.
I always attributed monster movie to something with like destruction or something that like doesn't exist. But then when he broke down like Predator and like I think you said Jaws, I kind of have to like rethink that definition now.
right, because Jaws is like, that's just a shark.
Exactly.
Or,
Yeah.
even the Meg is like a shark turned up to a 35 on a scale of 10. Like, I would say the Meg is like more monstrous, but Jaws is just a shark. But I think we could still call it a monster movie, even though it's.
But what about Sharknado?
Oh my goodness.
Sharknado is historical, so
It's a whole different man.
I think Jaws is an interesting one to look at with it. And, like I was saying earlier, I think some of it is some of the appeal of, definitely something that I've heard praised with Jaws is that we don't see that much of the shark, and it's so much scarier because of that. I personally haven't had that reaction, but I know that overwhelmingly is like what I've heard talked about with it. And I don't, I'm not trying to contradict that. But I think what you were talking about earlier, Ahsan, with like hiding Godzilla or only showing part of him, I like seeing the creature design. Like, I do kind of enjoy in this where we just see all of Godzilla and Kong. Like, they're cool to look at, but I agree with you that like it maybe is taking away some of the mystery, or at least putting us like it makes them feel smaller because we don't have that like human scale to compare to, maybe.
Yeah, there's like a healthy balance because like if you hide too much, you can run the risk of like boring the audience or just not making the film as compelling or interesting. And I think the previous Godzilla, the one before the 2014 one, did that a lot. Like you barely saw him until the very end. Versus like in the 14 one, like they showed more and more and more and more of him as the film went on. So you consistently like got to see more and more. Versus like another one, it was like you barely saw anything.
I think it was my editing professor. She was trying to like describe what like the horror aspect was of movies where you don't really see the monster, and it's like the second you see a part of it or like the entire thing, it kind of ruins the experience of horror, because beforehand, if you're like seeing the destruction or anything like that before you even know what the monster is, it's the fear of the unknown, so you have no idea what it is. And then like the second you see part of it or whatever the whole thing is, like you're rationalizing and you're trying to think of ways, like subconsciously humans think of the way like beat it or run away from it or things like that. So yeah, I just wanted to add that little tidbit.
I think there's definitely psychology, like the fight or flight thing you were talking about. That definitely comes into it.
Yeah.
It's kind of supposed to, I think, trigger our like animal instinct to a degree.
So Ahsan, you think the 2014 was better because you don't see a lot of it? Like I heard that was like the major complaint for that one.
The reason why, so it's not just that. I think they also did a good job at the human component of that story was really like it was really compelling, and it was a lot better than like the sequel. And I think the sequel just felt like, if I had to compare it, so it's like in the first movie you barely see him, but like they show more and more, and then when they finally see him, there's a fight, and then there's like 2 or 3 fights he's in that movie, and each fight he's always winning, and he's only loses the fight when like the 2 monsters like team up at him. So they kind of establish a power scale, meaning that Godzilla can like take any monster on by himself, but anytime they team up on him, he cannot fight them alone. They kind of make that very clear. Versus in the second movie, it was kind of like a luck of the draw. Like for most of the fights, I can't remember specifically how he lost some of the fights, but I remember for the most part he just wasn't winning until like Mothra did what she did to give him power or whatever. And I think the reason why I like the first one better than that one is because, like, in the second movie, anytime Ghidorah and Godzilla were to go fight, they would, like, do 2 punches and then go right back to the humans. And then it felt like they were trying to just hide for the CGI that they couldn't, like, keep on the screen or save money on the budget. Versus in the first movie, when they fought, it was, like, long-held camera stills, floating drone shots, or whatever you want to call it. And we saw them, like, trade blows for a very long time. And we got to watch the whole fight. And a lot of it we saw from the human level, too, to really, like, show the scale. Versus in the sequel, it's like we're, like, a wide shot. We see them all in frame, and they look smaller. And it's like, it doesn't really feel as impactful. Because I kind of come into these movies, like, not... most movies I come to for the plot, but these movies I kind of just throw the plot out of my head. I come for, like, the action or whatever. And when the action doesn't deliver, to me, it just kind of ruins it for me. Because, like, that's, like, the main draw factor of these movies, you know?
Right. Well, it is different. Like, I think talking about, like, a good monster movie, like, this is sort of different in that sense, where it's, like, in something where it's just Godzilla, even if he ends up fighting those other monsters, like, it seems like in most monster movies, the monster is in relation to humans in a way that, like, makes it about, like, it's almost like a man versus nature plot. Whereas with this, like, we literally have the conflict set up in the title. Monsters are gonna fight each other in this. So you kind of take that, like, other element of, like, what do monsters mean to us out of it to an extent, because we're just like, all right, cool, face off, like, Super Bowl monster fight. And I think that, like, changes the dynamic.
Quick fun fact, all these movies have less destruction than what happened at the end of Man of Steel. Just wanted to say that. Go ahead.
You think?
Is that confirmed?
No.
Oh.
No.
I think I was actually watching the fight at the end, and I was thinking, this is giving Man of Steel a run for its money. I haven't seen Man of Steel in a while, but
there was like nobody left at the end of Man of Steel, though. There was like Lois.
You think there was anyone left
Jimmy.
in Hong Kong after this?
I mean, there was that group of people at the end when, like, Kong was still there, and then Godzilla showed up like, "Hey, punk, put that axe back down."
Okay, but Hong Kong is, like, hella populated. Like, I think that's in, like, top 3 most populated cities.
But Metropolis is fictional, so they could just make up the numbers.
Metropolis is fixing, like, the next movie, though. Like, they're still operating, like, Daily Bugle. Not Daily Bugle, whatever it's called.
Yeah, but how long did that take to fix?
I mean, they were functional by the end of Man of Steel. He walked in and was like, "Hey guys."
Oh, Jesus, you're right.
Yeah, like, didn't, like, Godzilla nuke a whole city in the last movie?
Yeah, Boston is just wrecked out. But they evacuate Boston before, I think, for that.
Got it. Okay, yeah.
In this one, it was like, you know, we had a whole bunch of humans in the city while it was happening, and, like, there was no time to evacuate. Like, I got the sense that all those buildings were populated.
Yeah, it was on site.
Me too.
Oof.
Yeah, and, like, at one point, Godzilla just, like, pretty much sits on a building, like, he just falls through it. And I'm just like, imagine Godzilla falling on you.
Yeah.
And
That's it. That's instantaneous.
Or when Kong jumped off that building, that probably killed some people. When he Superman punched him.
Anytime he, like, had
It looked
atomic
cool.
breath but got punched in the neck and, like, turned his head, like, the wrong angle and it hit a building, like, whoever was in there got clapped.
yeah, it's like thousands of people dying
Yeah.
each time.
Also, R.I.P. to all the worms that died when Godzilla shot the breath through the earth.
Oh yeah, so, like, about that, is that just a reason to give that up to, like, timing and plot convenience, that, like, the hole to the center of the earth is just above exactly where he is with the apex, like, place?
I don't know that it's convenience because, so maybe it is, but also, like, Apex has been looking into Hollow Earth stuff, so it would make sense that maybe they would be near one of, like, the entry points. So maybe that fixes it, but I could be wrong there.
That's a good point. I mean, this movie does a lot of things that they just expect us to accept. Like, I don't understand how they built the whole entire base on Skull Island. Like, if you guys remember how hard it was to get into Skull Island in the original movie, like, they...
Oh, yeah, there's, like, all the fog around.
Yeah.
There's, like, a whole hurricane around.
Yeah, so they have tell me they built the whole base there, and they built the whole base on the Hollow Earth, like, all that. They just expect
And
you...
Kong didn't see that being set up.
Like, they just... Exactly. They just expect you to accept it, like... But
I
it
was
is what
kind
it
of
is.
thinking that. I was like, did they just do it at night all the time, but that's like a really good night's work to get all that in. 'Cause
That's
you
a
couldn't
better
do it
movie.
halfway.
Like, well, I want to watch the team have to like stealth build this thing around Kong
Yeah.
without getting destroyed.
And then assuming they did that at night, you have no idea what kind of nocturnal creatures are on that island that they have to just encounter.
There's still skull crawlers.
Yeah, like that island is a tourist for just having things that you just cannot fathom. And like, imagine building that at night and like having your troops get scooped up by like whatever is in the forest. I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good, man.
For some reason, I feel like Damien Chazelle is the guy to direct the movie about building the dome over Kong. I feel like he'd take like the first man approach.
I'd watch that.
I'd watch it out of curiosity.
If we could get into would it be better if it was just set up like?
Yeah, let's do that.
I don't know what it would look like if the fighting like wasn't justified. If they just showed up and the humans just had to deal with the destruction and people evacuating and stuff, and they were just kind of scrapping like they did at the end. I've never seen Pacific Rim, but I imagine it'd kind of be like that without the suits. But I think the monsters in that movie were just attacking cities, weren't they?
I think so. I only saw half of that, and I was just like hanging out with people while I did, so I wasn't really watching it. So I don't want to speak too much on it, but that was the sense that I got.
Did you say you also like saw half of King of Monsters?
No, I saw all the King of Monsters.
I was about to say, you just seeing half of these kaiju movies? You're not finishing these movies ever?
No, both of those I saw all of. Pacific Rim, I couldn't. I've seen part of it, but I don't really want to like say too much about it because I wasn't really paying attention.
I don't blame him.
What if people could like place bets on who won this fight, even though it was already predetermined?
Right, like or what if we even like made it a video game? Like we have video game competitions. What if we just did it like a sports match where it was like, all right, this week Mothra fights Rodan in I don't know, Bangkok. Like and that's this week and we do
That
it
would
like
be dope.
sports
That's literally like
matches.
that video game that they had, the Godzilla one. Not like the betting part, but like you pick the two creatures and then you fight and you pick different cities or locations. It was like, I feel like they could definitely bring that back now. It'd be pretty cool.
Would it be better though? I don't like the humans, so I'm inclined to say yes. Like it doesn't even have to be like the full 2 hours or hour and a half or whatever that these movies normally are. Like give us a good few minutes of these two monsters scrapping and causing destruction and then go home.
So like a higher production value, like Death Battle, like the YouTube channel Death Battle, but just higher production and only the fights.
Sure.
Honestly, that's probably what people want more so of, and like honestly, that's really unique.
Exactly. It wouldn't be taking from anything.
And I feel like we could do that. There's some big name actors in these. Like Kong Skull Island, that is a huge cast. That movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I would think that's a good chunk of the budget is the cast. So if you really just make it like a CGI slugfest, but make it really good and it's only 40 minutes, you're probably saving a lot of cost. Like I wonder if they would lose viewership with the way some action movies are trending, where we've got like, I feel like John Wick is maybe something that this could take from, where it's just like, you know, give us a setup that just makes an excuse for a whole lot of fight scenes. When it's something like a face-off like this, I think if we're talking like just a regular solo Kong movie, solo Godzilla movie, that might.
And don't they like do it within 10 minutes in John Wick? Like it doesn't take 40 minutes for that setup.
Yeah. The setup was really long in this movie. I have a really interesting idea. It's going to sound very weird, but definitely follow me on this one. So what if they did like an hour and a half, 2 hour long, let's say hour and a half, right? You go to the movie and it's like, imagine Death Battle at the movies, but it's like, instead of just one fight, it's like a bunch of fights. So there's like an undercard and there's like a major fight. So let's say for this movie, it's like
It's like an
there's three-
opener at a concert.
Yeah.
And then the main
So the
event.
first one, exactly. So the first one's like John Wick versus Red Hood. You watch that fight. Trent interlude, you go to the next fight. It's like Aquaman versus Namor. Next fight, it's like, I don't know, Darth Vader versus whoever you could pick. And then the final fight is Godzilla versus Kong. And it's only just a bunch of fight scenes for those who just want to watch that. And it's like an hour long at most. The whole thing is an hour long, but it's like a bunch of mini fights in between to lead up to the big fight. And it all totals to like an hour long. Therefore, you get your long movie thing, and it's only like the fights. If you want to do the movie budget or like fit that time span of a movie, I feel like that's a route they could go. But it's really, you would only attract a certain kind of crowd to things like that. But If we're gonna do
I
something,
mean, this is already for a certain type of crowd.
yeah, but
Yeah.
if you did only fight scenes, I think you satisfy like that market specifically. So
Yeah, I would see that as long as one of them at some point was going to be John Wick versus Jason Bourne, because I really want to know who would win there. Like,
Jesus Christ.
I don't know who, but I would love to see that.
I mean, one has more cuts. If they take away the cuts from Jason Bourne, then I think John Wick's got it.
that's a
Yeah,
good point.
yeah. In terms of skill level, I mean, give them both. Give one a pen and the other a pencil, and we'll just see what happens. Yeah, I do wonder, like, would they lose audience with that? Because, something like John Wick, I like those movies, but I'm also someone who likes action movies. I think if you don't like action movies, John Wick is really not the movie for you. But if you like it, it's like one of the best action movies ever.
Absolutely.
But I don't know, like, I'm not really a monster movie person, and I don't feel like the traditional moviness of this is doing anything for me. And I don't know if that's like most people's reactions, but I wonder if taking away the traditional movie around this fight, do we lose anything valuable there?
So you think it would be better if you didn't really care for the movie? So you think it would be better if they got rid of this whole story thing?
Yeah, I'm very here for what Ahsan's pitching, but I just wonder,
Okay.
like, on a broad scale, do any of you think we would lose anything? And, like, do you think the general population, it would take them out of it because it's, like, too much monster and not enough just, like, traditional story?
It's a good question.
I don't think you lose anything from this movie specifically, but I also think, or I think the more interesting thing I'm wondering is if this was a first like actual way to make like a 45 to hour long entertaining thing, how is it getting distributed? Because I don't think people would pay theater fees to sit and watch it. So then it's, are we doing an HBO Max straight to streaming? Is it just a long, really well produced YouTube video? If so, how is the company making any money back on it?
I mean, I would pay to see at least one of those things in a theater, but I don't know if that would be a viable thing studios to do.
I would too. But I think the whole undercard idea, like having people have to guess who's gonna win and like lead up to the fight in like anticipation, where there's like one winner, kind of the way Death Battle does it, how they promote their fights like months in advance. There's something like to be said of like this working, but I'm trying to figure out like who's going to, kind of like what David said, who's going to go to the theater. I think there's a chance that this won't affect the crowd at all, because for the most part, the things people loved about Kong vs. Godzilla is mainly the fighting. Like I don't know anybody who said they liked the plot or anything,
I was just gonna say, like, I don't think I've ever, no matter if you like this movie or don't, I don't think anybody in the history of watching any of these movies has ever said, man, I like this movie, but I wish they had more humans.
Yeah.
I'm with you there.
I think there's something to be said about that. So I think if you do like enough fighting that you can just only undercard of fights or whatever, you can get a good amount of people to show up. The one thing they have to really keep in mind is that if it's like a long fight scene, you really run the risk of losing interest, even though it's a fight scene. Like, there's a thing of fight scenes becoming drawn out.
Yeah.
I mean, The Raid is a good example of a movie with long fight scenes, but they did a good job at... It wasn't really a great job, but they paced it off so like the fights were in different locations. There was close quarters, gunfights, multiple enemies. Like they kind of did a 2v1 battle with the final guy. So you have to kind of space out your fights. It can't just be like Godzilla and King Kong fighting in Hong Kong the whole time. They gotta like hop in the ocean. They gotta go underground. They gotta go to Hollow Earth. Like you gotta switch the location, switch to like the parameters, switch to the variables. Give him an axe, give him no axe. Maybe.
A really strange comparison, but kind of like Peter Griffin and the chicken fight.
Perfect example. Perfect example.
Or like Injustice games, so you can like mess with the environment and throw shit to a different section of the map.
Yeah, because if it's just John Wick and Jason Bourne fighting on a rooftop for 20 minutes, we're gonna get bored. But if they like fall through a skyscraper, hop in a helicopter, or do something that's like inhumane, then we're like interested.
Yeah. I think something too, like I just this past weekend rewatched Mad Max Fury Road, which is almost like a 2-hour action scene, like not quite, but pretty close. But something that does is like the action scenes do a lot of storytelling. They do almost all of the storytelling. And I think like, the action in that movie is probably the best I've ever seen. But I think without that storytelling, it would take me out of it if it was just action. So I don't think a 2-hour straight action thing is the way to go. I think, like you're saying, it has to. I think the changing locations thing would help if it was just like 20 minutes of action. But I think there is only so long you're going to keep everyone's attention if it's just punching and shooting and monsters doing things.
Yeah.
Something I want to look into a little bit with this, and this is sort of like, I don't want to say like the human element, but I think with monster movies, like there could be, and sometimes this is exploited, like sometimes you can examine like certain societal things or like, you know, dig into some kind of theme like Arrival. I don't know if I would call that a monster movie, but it's similar. And that's like, that really uses like international relations and like, I don't want to say like a real world parallel, but it treats like an alien invasion in the way that I think is somewhat realistic to how we would do it, or similar. Like this new-ish book that I just read, Axiom's End, is kind of a similar thing where it's like it's first contact with aliens, but it's actually using it to like do some really good like holding up a mirror to certain aspects of society. I think there are monster movies that we could do that with in a way, but you know, I don't want us to like, I don't want them to half-ass a theme. If they're not going to do it, I'd rather they not even try. You know, I want to hear what your guys' thoughts are on like, do you think that's something we should explore? Like, is it more viable? I think with these like fight movies, I think it's more viable to do the just like half an hour fight scene. But with a more traditional like solo monster movie, do we think that's a good route to take, and like how much thematic meat is there in this genre to explore? I don't know that I've seen it done well aside from Arrival, which isn't exactly a monster movie, but I don't know if you guys have examples of anything like that.
I think the best monster movie with a social commentary, hands down, is The Iron Giant. Like,
I've heard that.
No, especially when he has the whole thing with like bullets and everything, and how he just, it's just
I
beautiful.
gotta see that.
What? Who hasn't seen that?
That's me. I'm sorry. I've been meaning to.
Evan,
I know it's. I've heard it's
talk.
good. I just haven't gotten around to it.
we're gonna talk.
I'll put it on the list.
If I'm being honest, I don't remember most of it, so I really can't talk.
Wow.
I know I've heard, but remind me. The Iron Giant is supposed to represent. He's supposed to represent like weapons in general, isn't he? I haven't seen
Yeah,
it,
pretty
like I
much
said.
just warfare. He was pretty much created. It takes place in the 50s, so there's this whole Red Scare kind of undertone going on, and he's pretty much been created to stop communism, but he doesn't want to hurt anybody. And this little boy finds him, and they create this kind of beautiful friendship, and the little boy's the only one that doesn't see him as a monster.
Right. And another thing that I haven't seen that kind of I've at least heard has a monster represent something else is like District 9. I've heard kind of does a thing where like all of the aliens in that are kind of treated like immigrants, and they're like put in detainment camps and that kind of thing.
Isn't there?
I haven't seen it,
There's a
so I don't
sequel
want to
coming
like
out, I think.
say too much about it, but that is like another example that I've at least heard of that does something like that.
I think a sequel just got announced.
District 10. Let's get it.
Have y'all seen The Babadook?
I
Yeah.
have not.
Okay.
No.
I'm trying to think of like just good monster movies.
This isn't a monster movie, but like kind of E.T. Like,
Yeah.
that's whole an analogy for divorce and finding your family.
Yeah. I recommend Babadook if you haven't seen it. There is like social commentary on grieving, and I'm just gonna leave it at that because if I say anything else, it's gonna spoil the movie. But
How did you feel about the dog in that movie? Do you not remember what happens to the dog?
dog,
Yeah. You
no, I don't.
It's
Actually,
crazy.
let me look it up. Hold up. That's bad. If I
Yeah,
don't
there's a
remember
whole
that.
thing
Hold
with the
up.
son and the dog.
I haven't seen it, but it sounds from context like the dog probably dies at the.
The dog, well, the son's annoying, but the dog's annoying too. The dog just doesn't stop barking, and I'm like, bro, this is too close to real life. Why did we film this?
I feel like it'd be hard to make an annoying dog that doesn't talk. Like, you can't get more annoying than the dogs in Up, but like that's because they all talk.
Wow, Evan.
Yeah, batting 1,000 a day on taking stuff down that you like.
Jesus, Evan.
I have hot takes about Up. I feel like that movie is really good for the first 5 minutes and then falls off hard.
Dude,
Oh yeah, could not agree
Oh
more.
my gosh.
Could not agree more. So next thing I want to talk about is what makes a good movie monster. Who wants to take that first?
A cool roar. The less humans, the better. And any superpowers for better destruction. Which is kind of the reason I was rooting for Godzilla. I mean, that atomic breath is kind of undefeated.
Yeah.
Plus, my dad favors him, so, that whole familial thing. Those are my things for that. That's about it.
I like the movie monster to be beatable, but not overpowered. So the movie Jeepers Creepers, I do not like because there's no way you could destroy that monster, that he's indestructible. And I don't really find it believable. I like monsters that are... Obviously, Godzilla's not believable, but something to the effect of, like... If you've seen Lights Out, not the greatest movie, but the way you could... Yeah, the way you could fight that monster is by turning on the lights or using a flashlight, right? So even though the monster is very strong, you have a way or a component to level the playing field and fight back. I prefer...
UV light, too.
Exactly. I prefer movies where the humans have a chance at which to fight back the enemy, So movies where it's like there's nothing you can do about it unless there's like a Deus Ex Machina or whatever like that, then I don't really enjoy that. So
I kind of feel the opposite with movie monsters. Like I'm okay if we don't have a human can't beat them. I almost like that better. I don't mind if they are defeated, but my main thing is like I want them to be powerful. I want them to be, if we do beat them, they have to be really hard to beat and they got to be consistently powerful. Like
the Kraken, Evan?
Yes, I've been waiting to say the Kraken this entire podcast. I shouldn't get into it too much because we already talked about it a lot when we did Dead Man's Chest, but the Kraken's my favorite movie monster by a long shot. I mean, I say I'm Team Godzilla, I'm really Team Kraken. Put him up against any monster in anything, and I want the Kraken to win.
Nah, put him on land and he can't do nothing.
I mean, we haven't seen that. We don't know how much of a beast he can be up there.
All right, Evan.
Remember the octopus in 22 Jump Street? We'll go all that on, like, San Francisco's ass. Like, that's what the Kraken on land is like. I don't know what you're talking about. But, I want him to be consistently powerful. I don't want him to be, like, a Scooby-Doo villains are like this a lot, where it's like they're, strong until their mask gets taken off, and then they're just humans. But that's, a kid's show. But, like, sometimes there will be, like, Smaug in the Hobbit movies, I feel like is a good example of, like, being overpowered to start, and then as soon as the heroes show up, he just gets dumb and, like, lame, which I hate about that, even though I love the Hobbit story, and I love Smaug as a monster, but, like, the way they do him so dirty in that movie. I don't know exactly how much, like, this adheres to that. I do kind of see where you're coming from, Ahsan, with, like, I can see why you do want them to not be, like, super overpowered, because then it's, like, less interesting. But, I want it to be monstrous. I want it to be a force to be reckoned with.
Absolutely.
If it's easy to beat, there's no drama, and, like, I'd much rather it just survive, like the monster's alive at the end, than it die in some lame way.
I agree. Yeah, I definitely want there to be a struggle with the battle. I just guess for me with Jeepers Creepers, it's like, without spoiling the movie, but they tried everything in the book and, like, nothing worked. So to me, I might be different in this. I just did not enjoy that. I think that's the one monster movie I stand against. But
would it change anything if it was from the monster's perspective? Like,
yes,
for example, Brightburn?
I still gotta see that. But I guess, for example, the reason why I don't mind Godzilla, he's like damn near indestructible, is because his battle is not with the humans, it's with another monster. So I think that's why I don't mind it there. Versus like when it's a human versus monster component, I would like there to be some sort of like, even if it's a little edge they can take. Like the alien, for example, is very hard to kill. If you cut it open, its blood will like, break apart your like physical body because it's like acidic or whatever. So like that monster is very hard to kill. Like, it's like really perceptive, has great sound, sense of hearing. It can always hunt you down. Like it's hard to kill. But this end of the day, like there's a way to kill it. And Jeepers Creepers, this man is like almost Superman with like a Batman like body. Like he has bat wings or whatever. It's just not doing it for me,
Ew.
Have you seen that movie? Have you guys seen that movie, by the
No.
way?
Yeah.
I just know that dude. I've seen his face. I know he just creeps the hell out of me.
I did not like that movie. I'm gonna stop, but like,
I agree, though. I think Formidable Force is definitely, like, step number one to getting me interested, because otherwise, what's happening? But I am biased to, like, when movies take that humanity in the monster approach, like, going back to Frankenstein. But if we're going for just, like, straight brutality and just, like, monstrosity, I don't mind that either, especially when you get to, like, some horror movies or, like, Nightmare on Elm Street, where it's like, it's pretty hard to beat Freddy, but if you can pull them into the real world, you can mess with them.
Exactly.
And that type of thing.
What if Jason really like wasn't indestructible and they just shot him and the movie ended? Like,
If they took, like, a super realistic approach to slasher, like, kind of like The Strangers did in 2008, like, I think it works. It's scary.
oh, I prefer those over the monstrous ones, like where the quote unquote monster is human, like Hush or something like that.
another great example of it like not done well is like the Predator. Like obviously that monster should not be beaten by a single human being, but there are ways to circumvent your circumstances and kill it. I think a lot of times in those movies, the Predator gets killed in ways that it should not. Like they hype it up and like they through the script you show how strong it is, how perceptive it is. Yet it's always dying in like a very like weak way.
In the first one?
No. The second one, the third one, and
I didn't see those.
I would argue.
Alien versus Predator?
Yeah, I would argue. And I can't remember if it was one or two. In one of those, I would argue.
Doesn't he get like stabbed in the back or some BS?
Not by a human. Those are alien. Fight.
No, but I know it was an alien tail, but like he didn't see that with his mask that has like 360 vision or something.
And he not only that, but like those aliens are like very perceptive. So like they're hunters. Like they always have a sixth sense. So.
Right, so that's kind of a case where it's like it gets defeated, but it's in a way where it wouldn't logically be defeated. Like that I feel like is the biggest cardinal sin of a movie monster. For me,
absolutely.
Anyway.
Oh, what about Signs, where it was like water or something, or the things from War of the Worlds, where it was just human germs clapped them?
Yeah, I hate. That's called a Deus Ex Machina, right?
Yeah.
I hate when that. Yeah, I hate those with the passion.
I mean, if it's earned, I think it can sometimes feel less like a Deus Ex Machina. Like, I don't know, this isn't exactly a monster, but like, I think when we talked about Spider-Man 3 on Patreon, I bumped on the way that Venom dies in that because it just feels like it comes out of nowhere that like he's susceptible to sound. And that's like his big weakness. Not because it's a bad one, it was just the way it's incorporated. So I think it can work. In most cases, I agree, Ahsan. Like, Deus Ex Machinas, I feel like should kind of be avoided. But I think there's a way it can work. You just gotta... It's gotta be incorporated correctly. I don't know if I have, like, strategies to point to for, like, what the correct way is. But I think it's possible.
And wait, real quick, I don't mean to defend Spider-Man 3. I feel kind of dirty doing this, but like they did the thing with the bell tower where he was banging against the bell tower and the suit was coming off. That was before the end of the movie where you saw he was vulnerable to sound.
I know it was set up. I think we talked about this when we did it, but like it still just doesn't work for me. Like the way they pull it in at the end, it feels like it comes out of nowhere. Maybe that's just me nitpicking. But like, it didn't feel earned in that way. I haven't seen War of the Worlds, so I don't know about like the common cold. I think it's the common cold, right? That beats them. I have heard about that.
Something germs from humans or something.
Yeah. So I don't want to like say whether that's like whether that falls under what I'm talking about or not because I haven't seen it. But I can understand what you're saying there, Ahsan, with like it does feel like. But I don't know. Do you feel like that subverts the power of those monsters? Like, is that killing them in a lame way, or is it maybe the only way it could work?
So I guess it doesn't make them seem weak. I just think, I guess World War is a hard example because I feel like not that that's a realistic thing that would happen, but like if an alien did come to Earth, like there's a chance that like our environment is just not made for them. So even though it's a Deus Ex Machina, I think in certain instances you can defend it. I guess the way it makes the monster seem diminished is like, I'll use Predator 3 for example. In the first two movies, like they set them up to be like, yo, you can't fight them one-on-one. If you're gonna fight them, you gotta use like traps, you gotta use camouflage, you gotta like sneak around them and use like booby traps or whatever. In Predator 3, like 2 predators died by like 1v1 fights. Like one of them died through a sword fight really easily.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Another one died from, I think it was like a C4 explosion. Like the dude just held it on his hand and just blew himself up. But the fact that the predator didn't even like see it coming was like made it seem less intelligent than they really are. Because they're like the kings of planting traps and having like suicidal bombs. So like for him to not see
apex predator.
Exactly. So things like that I think make the monsters seem weak. I don't think Deus Ex Machinas really do that for me. I just think as far as script writing, I don't really particularly like them. But like again, if I see a script or a movie that does it well, like I'm open to being like accepting it. I just, in my personal viewing history, I haven't seen it done well.
I feel like it's still like, even if it can be done well, it maybe is something to avoid. Like if you can.
Yeah. Because I really enjoy like people overcoming adversity. I think that's a big thing for me, just in like storytelling. A lot of people can like relate to that. So I think for me, whenever I see someone get out of a sticky situation, I like that a lot. So when it's like something got handed to them, so to speak, it's like, okay, it's nice that they survive, but like doesn't really feel rewarding.
Right. How do we feel about humanoid versus less humanoid monsters? Which one? I'm for less humanoid. I think the more foreign it looks, the better. Like that's why I love the xenomorphs in the Alien movies. Like they just look.
Yeah.
They're like they look a little bit like insects, but and same with the I think they're called the heptapods in Arrival. Those aren't really monsters, but I just love how unlike us they look. How do you guys feel about like humanoid versus non-humanoid?
Less human, the better.
I agree.
Yeah.
If you're gonna do human, it has to be like realistic. So like Don't Breathe is a perfect example. I think it pulls you in because like it seems somewhat plausible. You know what I mean?
Yeah, or you do like a sci-fi twist on it and you start to get into like sentience or something.
Yeah.
But like if you're gonna be monsters and it's the movies, like go hard or go home. Like why are we here? I spent $20. I want to see how many mouths the xenomorph has and how long they all come out.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So in that sense, like, what do we think? Because I feel like both Godzilla and Kong are kind of on the more humanoid side. Obviously, they're much bigger, but they both have a head on top, 2 arms and 2 legs.
Stand upright.
Yeah, they stand upright. So I feel like that falls more under humanoid than not. So like, personally, I feel less invested because of that, because I'm not relating to them on a human level. So that's one thing. But then I'm also like less compelled by them as a monster. How do you guys feel like that factors in with them?
I never really thought about it, if I'm being honest. But it is a good point you brought up. I guess I felt more related to. I never really felt related to them, kind of like you did. I guess the only time I really did was when they brought that humanized Kong with the girl. Other than that, I'm kind of with you on that.
Yeah, it kind of was like the movie really wanted you to be on Kong's side and relate with Kong, and even how the trailers cut, it's very obvious that's the intention, but I don't know, it didn't, I never had that moment. Like, I've had those moments in Kong movies when he dies and stuff, and they say that, like, iconic line, but with this movie, it was just kind of like, I want to see this giant ape punch a lizard.
I guess there's one moment that just popped in my head that kind of made me feel somewhat relatable to Kong, is when he broke his arm and like he had like look of fear in his eye. Obviously humans are susceptible to having that exact thing. I guess that's if you want to reach and say like that's relatable, I guess you could say that somewhat.
Oh, I felt for Kong when Like, they just beat Mechagodzilla, and Godzilla was making his way over, and he stood up, and there was this look in his eye that you can clearly tell he doesn't want to fight anymore. And Godzilla just waited for him to put the axe down before walking away. I was like, I verbally said when I saw that, Kong doesn't want to fight anymore, man. Just go on, Godzilla. Like, at that point, I was like, yo, all right, they did what they needed to do. They don't need to fight anymore.
Team Kong.
All right, I didn't say that.
I guess from like a character perspective, like Godzilla has asserted himself as the alpha at that point. So
Yeah.
I when I first saw it, I thought it was a little bit like, okay, they just need the movie to be over, so they're gonna just have him drop it. But I guess like from his motivation, like I guess the fight is enough where he feels like, I'm still number one.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, he knows. He's like, I killed you, and now you're back. But are we going to do it again? I don't think so. How did you guys feel about them pretending to be dead, and then Godzilla was just like, well, I guess they're done, and just like,
oh, you mean the ships playing?
Yeah,
dead?
I thought that was the most like, just like whatever. Like it was just to me that
was
whole
so
experience was the scene. Like that was the filmmaking embodied. Like it was so just like we're trying to make 2 hours. Come on, guys.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, like,
they-
that felt like it might have been, like, the human's smartest moment, in a way. But now that you're saying it, like, yeah, that probably shouldn't have stopped him. Like, he can still see the gigantic-ass freaking boats in the water.
Yeah, the gigantic.
He made eye contact with Kong, and they, like, grimaced at each other. Like, what?
It like diminishes intelligence a little bit to me.
Yeah. But again, like, I think, David, you mentioned it at the beginning. Like, they should have just airlifted Kong from the beginning. Like, I know they had to set up the fight scene, but, like, come on.
Mm-hmm.
You should have known.
Like in the last 2 movies, Godzilla like did not stop until like he atomic breath inside their like face. Like so he wouldn't just leave Kong like right there.
Yeah.
He did that twice in this
Yeah.
movie.
And I think the times he didn't, like, it was when Ghidorah beat him and he had to go recharge and get nuked back to life and stuff. Also, one other thing I forgot to mention, like, a thing that I like, and neither of these monsters have this, I like them to be fast. I like monsters to be fast. I feel like when they're punching each other, it is moving a little slow. Like, I get that they're big and that their fists are probably moving at like 50 miles an hour, but I feel like it should, and I'm probably reading into this way too much, but I feel like it should be proportionate to, like, when a human punches another human, it's fast. It takes a second. I feel like it probably shouldn't be that different for them.
I mean, there were some moments I saw especially in the fight in the city, where it was moving way faster than I thought it would be.
When he was crawling
Like they
on the
were
ground.
jumping. Yeah, they were jumping on top of each other, just crawling on the ground. Yeah.
I always wondered that, Evan. Like I wasn't never sure why like monster movies always make the big monster move slow. Like I thought the logic was like when a human swats a fly, the fly moves faster than we can perceive it. So like to them, they see us move slower.
But
then,
see, that's an instinct for them to survive with.
Exactly.
So I feel like that
Yeah.
evolutionarily makes sense.
Right, exactly. And then on top of that, I also don't know how like size would influence like their speed, because then you get the skull crawlers, like they're really big, but you see how fast like they move too. So I was like, I just wasn't sure why they did that.
Or the monsters from A Quiet Place. Those
Yeah.
things are-
Yeah.
Yeah, or, I mean, again, as a counterexample, the Kraken moves pretty quick when it's tearing apart the
Exactly.
ship. It's not hesitating. It's moving really fast. Like, there's that shot, I don't know if you guys remember it, when in the final battle with the Pearl, it, like, goes up, aims for, like takes half a second to aim for, like, the cannon holes, and then just wrecks all their cannon holes. And, like, it's really quick. It's, like, before they can react at all, before they can load anything. Like, the only times it's moving slow is when it's, like, feeling things out and, like, trying to get a sense of what the boat is. After that, it's all bets are off. It is wrecking this boat. And, like, moving as fast as it would.
Exactly.
And I don't want to, like, say that because they're slow, that's, like, necessarily a bad thing. I just feel like I'd rather they be fast.
It'd be even cooler to see, actually.
Yeah, like it can be slow for the money shot, like that first time
Right.
like, Kong hits Godzilla on the boat and you just heard the trailer music, or when he jumps in, but like, well, yeah, you need to feel that urgency.
Yeah, or
Right.
like just employ traditional slow mo for that. Like if we want that money shot, like you're talking about, like slow mo's that's exactly what slow mo's there for. But like
Are you saying Zack Snyder should have directed this?
no, because Zack Snyder would have made this movie 5 hours long, but and the fight scenes would have taken up half of it because like every second. Also, they all would have had 15 abs. So I don't
He
know.
would have found a way to make Kong more shirtless.
He definitely would have. He'd like have him like shed all his fur or something. Get like I don't even know what post hibernation Kong with more toned muscles. Yeah, long and short of it, I want him to be faster. So David, you wanted to bring up just kind of looking at Kong and Godzilla's like appearances and the crossover between them that this is doing. Like, I mean, you can explain it further if you want, but like, what did you want to dig into with that?
Oh, yeah, I was just curious why people love, like, there's so many Godzilla movies. There's like 40 of them, and it's just like, why, and King Kong has all his movies, and why do people, one, love these monsters so much, and then also, why do we love to see, like, the crossover events of, like, King Kong versus Godzilla, Alien versus Predator, Jason versus Freddy, like, or now we see the extended universes in the MCU. Like, what about worlds colliding is so interesting to audiences?
For me, it's a destruction. I think it's just because it's so abnormal that like it intrigues me. That I kind of just want to see the element of like just destruction and kind of chaos. But as far as the crossover, I think because in this specific example, Kong is the apex of his world, Godzilla's the apex of his world, and with that being said, you're kind of curious to see how they would fare against someone else on equal footing. And I think there's always a curiosity of that.
Yeah, it's the commonalities. They're similar in some way. Like both of these two are kaiju, Alien and Predator, are both the aliens, and Jason and Freddy are like slashers. So with them, plus it's like they're kind of putting an end to those conversations that you sometimes have with your friends, like, oh, Freddy could kick Jason's ass, or Jason always has to sleep, or something like that.
Right.
Like, there's
Well, that's
always,
interesting. So do you think these movies are more fan service than anything else? To go to Evan's
actually.
first point with like the lack of inspiration, like are these movies, are they meant to be inspired, or are they just meant to service to the fans?
Definitely,
I think these are high budget death battles.
Yeah, I mean, I almost prefer it to be like an unending debate where it's just like, you know, the middle school table, like lunch table debate where like you'd never get to the end of it. It's like, I think that's the very first scene of The Boys is like them talking, like the two kids talking about, like,
Oh yeah,
you know, the deep would like we would like get a shark and like kill translucent. Oh, how's he gonna see him? It's invisible. Like, I almost would rather it just stay in that realm. And you know, when we do have the crossovers, of course I'm like interested because it's like, yeah, let's see it. Let's see it actually happen. That'd be cool. But I feel like it's more fun, and maybe it's just because I enjoy debating it. But like, I feel like it's almost more fun when we don't know, and we can just debate it eternally.
I mean, you could still debate it even after the fact, like, because you could always just argue that was that director or that writer's vision for who would win the fight.
Right. Well, I think it's also often like, you know, Warner Brothers owns both of these properties, which is why they're doing it. But I think in a lot of cases, like one that I've heard people talk about, Iron Man versus Batman, like the two tech billionaires who would win in that fight.
I don't like Batman, but I think he's got that one.
I think it depends. If you've got Iron Man 3's, all of his suits, like, he's got a chance.
How much prep time does Batman have, though?
Right, but see, this is the fun thing. Like, this is like, there's so many different routes you could take. It's fun to debate, like, all the different ins and outs of it. Like, I think somebody once brought up, I'm forgetting who it was, but, like, they brought up, like, Spider-Man versus Batman. How can... what was the argument? It was, like, Batman is, like,
Batman
the
can't
master
get around
of
a spider
surprise.
sense.
Spider-Man can never be surprised.
Right.
So, like, it's a stalemate or something like that. But I feel like that's the more fun way to engage, is, like, that eternal debate. Jason Bourne
There was
versus
a death
John
battle
Wick.
on that Spider-Man one.
Like, who wins? I don't know. It's fun to just... You know, I'd almost rather live in the uncertainty. But I don't know. Do you guys feel differently, or because I think there is something to be said for like, yeah, let's actually see it. It'd be cool to do.
Nah, give me an answer, and if it's not the answer I wanted, you're wrong.
I like the ones where it's like really evenly split, like you said, the uncertainty, because obviously just having the answer kind of ruins that element of surprise, and there's no reason to talk about it because everyone knows the answer, you know? Like, nobody ever debates who would win, Superman or John Wick. Like, that's something, like, no one's going to debate that. Like, so, like, but it's always Superman and Goku. Like, it's always a debate people be having because, you know, there's different writers, different universes, so it's, like, hard to compare the strengths. So that's, like, I prefer the uncertainty, too. If you're going to make them fight, you have to live in reality. So obviously for Godzilla and Kong, Godzilla keeps using his atomic breath, and obviously Kong doesn't fare well. So I like that.
Right, you got to have them at full strength, I think.
Exactly.
Whatever full strength means.
Absolutely.
I feel like the common ground or the commonality between everything we're saying is just that these films thrive on spectacle, and like everything else we don't need. But I am interested as to why these characters have sustained such longevity through generations with that spectacle. Because Pacific Rim, are we getting a third? Who cares? In 60 years, are they going to be making Pacific Rim the 67th? Probably not, but I'll probably see another Godzilla movie. I'll probably see King Kong remade another 3 times before I die. So, like, why do we need these characters?
Right, and it was way before they even crossed over. Like, there were so many more Godzilla movies before Kong versus Godzilla happened, so...
And Pacific Rim is almost like Godzilla versus a Transformer anyway. Like, that's almost a crossover movie in itself without actually mixing IPs.
Is it... It's not the stories. Is it just the monsters themselves that people are attracted to for some reason?
It has to be the iconic characters. Like, the same way, I'm not a fan of Friday the 13th, personally, but that movie still... There's a new one they're making right now, so obviously it has to be about Jason. That's like, he's iconic. But the question is like
Friday the 13th.
Yeah, they are. But the question is like, why are they iconic? You know, like what? But that's all subjective, I guess, for the most part.
I think part of it, and maybe you guys can speak to this a bit because you've actually seen some of the older versions or older movies that both of these are in. I know I've heard that like Kong originally, like the 1933 movie, that was kind of supposed to be, I think, like an allegory for like colonization and slavery.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know if that's like part of the appeal. I haven't seen the original, and I think the '05 one that Peter Jackson made is almost a carbon copy of it. So I don't know how much that one goes into it. And then Godzilla, like, I don't know this for sure, but the time it came out, I looked it up before we started. I think the first appearance of Godzilla, I could be wrong, I think it's 1954. So I think he maybe is born from like anxieties about like nuclear warfare, like Cold War paranoia at the time, because, you know, he's kind of like, you know, he's got his atomic breath, he can basically turn himself into a nuke. So that feels like...
Wasn't that always like the cautionary tale of Godzilla? Was like, we humans made him. Like when we bombed Japan and Hiroshima, the radiation birthed this creature.
Oh yeah, isn't that the plot of The Host too? Like there's a monster... Oh shoot, was it Korean? There's a monster movie based on like pollution, and the monster in that movie comes from like bad humans doing bad things.
Yeah, it's Bong Joon-ho, right? I think that's him.
Yeah, I think so.
And then within Kong, you have the whole planes killing him, and then he falls, and then they're like, the planes didn't kill him, beauty killed the beast. So there's this real commonality of like, who's the monster and who's the man? Like, where does humanity lie on this like spectrum?
Yeah. Aren't they also like pioneers? Is that why they lasted so long? Because they were like some of the first to do this?
Probably because
like these types of movies.
Because there's no one really more iconic. If you look at monster movies, like there's not, in terms of like giant monster movies, there's not one I can think of other than like the Iron Giant, where it's like an iconic.
That's kind of more recent, relatively.
Yeah.
I think that's like 98, isn't it?
Yeah, when I think of monster movies, I think of like Atomic Age cinema. So you have like Creature in the Black Lagoon, Mummy, Dracula.
I think some of it is like, you know, in terms of updating these, like, I think some of it is, and I've talked with you a little bit on the discussion board about this, David. Like, I think there's kind of a change with it, like in scaling up how big Kong is. Like, it's kind of dealing with him more as like a force. Like, we can't kill him, and he's a monster that is, I feel like, maybe can represent like our, like, that we as humans are at nature's mercy a little bit more. Like, I don't think they were going for this allegory, but I think if you really wanted to go for symbolism in this, like the fact that the two like natural monsters in this beat Mechagodzilla, this like corporate created technological monster, like you could read that as symbolically like, okay, nature is going to have the last word with us. I don't think there was intention with that, but I think you could read it that way.
Yeah. I also think a lot of the people who grew up watching the original Godzillas are now in the position to make movies, and they want to see it done better with better technology. I think those are like some of the people who are like in the studios, you know. Back
in some of those old movies, this is a quick side note, Godzilla had a move where he would sit on his tail and slide forward and kick the opponent. I don't know how that was physically possible for him to accomplish, but I kind of want to see that.
Yo, that was in the game. That was in the game too, bro.
Also, if you want to see weird original movement, the original way the Xenomorph used to move was like he did like a weird crab walk, and you can find the clips on YouTube. It's real weird.
Okay, we're looking that up.
Is it like is that like deleted footage or something?
Yeah. And it's like terrible because it's not edited at all. It's just the raw footage of a guy in a Xenomorph suit just like crab walking over to somebody, and then he just like rolls up and stands.
Yeah, well, I think the look of it, that can sort of be part of it. Like, you know, maybe some of the appeal, like these are two, we were talking earlier about like how some monsters are kind of hidden. To my knowledge, like we saw full shots of Kong and Godzilla, like from the word go. Like, I don't feel like they have that around them the way that like the Xenomorph does. And, you know, later versions have shown him, or the Xenomorph variations more fully, or like with CGI or whatever. So I don't know if that plays a part in it. I know I've seen shots of like, you know, I think in the 33 version, doesn't Kong like actually fight a T-Rex and we see the whole fight? Like, it's not, it's not like cutting away in that horror trope way.
Yeah, like it stays on it and you see the whole thing.
Yeah, and that's like from the beginning. Like, of course, in 2005 when Peter Jackson did it, we had the technology to make it look really cool. But I think even in like the very first one, they had like the little puppets going at each other like that.
Yeah.
It would be funny in some of those old ones where they'd like cut away to like it'd be like an overhead shot, and it's clearly a toy car, but it's supposed to be like the illusion that like it'd be like a car driving around a mountainside or something, and zoomed out, and it's supposed to be like the illusion that this is like a helicopter shot or something, but it's clearly just a toy car on a model set or something like that.
Yeah, I remember seeing that with the original like 1980s Clash of the Titans. Whenever they like have creatures fighting each other, it's clearly claymation and they're moving around like all
Medusa.
Jittery. Oh, Medusa.
Yep.
I don't think I made it all the way through, but I think I did see that scene. It's just, I think there were like hellhounds at one point. Those were the worst, as I recall. It's been like 10 years since I saw it.
Or any of those. I think Jason and the Argonauts, they had a Cyclops where it was claymation. It was bad.
I can imagine. But like now, I think that maybe is part of the appeal though, is that now, like, since CGI started getting better, we can do these, like, just have Kong fully in shots and like he looks great all the time. I feel like maybe it's getting away from like the original appeal, but like that is something novel that we have with these new ones where, you know, we can make him look really good instead of looking all jittery like that. But I don't feel like there's any of like those two like kind of symbolic things I was mentioning, like how Kong is an allegory for like colonization and Godzilla's like nuclear fears. I don't think any of that is carrying over into these new versions. But
Yeah.
that's also not what we're really like engaging with as much. Like that's less because of course like in the 50s everyone is scared of the atom bomb. So like that's a product of its time. That's less of a concern now or it's at least less brought up now.
The originals Kongs were always about a woman,
Yeah.
specifically a white woman, and it can be argued that it was also like a heavy racial thing back when it was in what was the original 30s, 20s?
Yeah, 33.
Like Jungle Fever
Yeah.
type thing.
Oh yeah, totally.
exactly. And Kong was supposed to represent. Well, you get it.
I saw a lot of people on Twitter saying that about Kong, like in 2021. Like, why is the quote unquote black king? I'm like, why are you even calling him a black king? Like, why are you identifying with a monkey? Like, you're doing
Right.
You're doing exactly what like the Jim Crow. Never mind, I'm not gonna get into it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think they're definitely shying away from that in this. Like, I don't feel
Absolutely.
them nodding
Yeah.
to the origins of the character with any of the like they made in Skull Island. Like, they made that a Vietnam War movie. Like, it was nothing about colonization. It was all like
Right.
Kong was supposed to be like the U.S. fighting the Viet Cong. So they kind of did that. So I wonder if that was a move to maybe like make it about something, but not about what he was originally about. Where like, and Vietnam, I feel like is a little safer to touch now, where we're like 50 years out. I think people still have, grievances about that and like stuff they're unhappy about, but I don't feel like anything they did with Skull Island would have like got people riled up again about Vietnam or anything. It didn't feel insensitive to that. But they kind of made it about something, but not about what Kong was originally made to comment on or like represent.
Yeah, I did appreciate within this film, though, that they kept the consistency that, like, Kong only communicated to a girl, and I think it was smart of them to make it a little girl so there wasn't the sexual weirdness of it all, and it was just kind of more, like, wholesome, but it was nice to see that consistency with the character.
Right, and it seems like they were maybe going for that a little bit with, like, the Brie Larson character in Skull Island.
That's what I thought.
But they didn't push it too much.
I'm
They
glad they didn't.
They did have the fight where like, and I think they
was a
had
long
this
one.
in both the 30s version and the Peter Jackson one, where Kong is fighting another monster while holding the woman in his hand and like protecting her while fighting the monster. I think is something that happens in all three of those.
Oh yeah, that was another thing. Like, it was always the Empire State Building when he was back at the city fighting planes.
That's why I like that little touch in this movie when he was on top of like, it wasn't the Empire State Building because he was in Hong Kong, but the building had like that look with like the pointy top.
Yeah, the spire at the top.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was holding it like he does.
And you see the size difference compared to like how he would have done it in the original. Like, it just like
Right.
shows how much he's grown. I thought was pretty cool.
His feet were basically on the ground. Like, he's
Pretty much, yeah.
I wonder though, like like I said, I haven't seen those, but I was familiar with like, that shot of him on the Empire State Building. I don't know how you can't be if you're of a certain age at this point. Like, but I didn't feel like that shot in this movie was really calling back to that. I know the one you're talking about, so maybe it did its job well enough, but it didn't look like it was, paying homage to that. At least from where I sat. Maybe if I went back and looked at it, I'd see it.
I don't think it was paying homage to it either. I guess it just like, for me personally, just popped in my head.
I feel like it has to be, though. Like, you can't put King Kong on a giant building with, like, a pointy top and him hold it that way and not think of the image.
right.
But
And you spend so much time animating it.
That's true, but they kind of seemed like they were playing it off more as like a strategic move for him to surprise Godzilla. It felt more like a mechanic within the fight.
Well, why didn't he just duck and cover behind a building then, Evans?
I totally think it was a mechanic in the fight, but I think that was, like, the little nod in that moment. Because it's not about him climbing the building. Like, it's about him getting Godzilla. So, like, when you have that kind of 2-for-1, for the audience that knows, it's like, oh, I see you, filmmaker, you're winking at me.
I didn't feel the wink in that moment, though. Maybe that was just me.
I mean, you ain't see the other ones.
But I know the shot. Like, I still... maybe you're right. Maybe maybe I missed it because I'm a little bit less in tune to it, but I am familiar with that shot, and it didn't quite feel like it was being like, hey, look, it's the Kong thing.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it could be.
If he was holding a woman, would you have seen it?
I mean, I suppose it would certainly call it out more, so maybe.
I'm looking at it right now on Google. I guess the reason why it stuck out to me is because, like, when he was hiding up there, I was like, okay, he's obviously hiding from Godzilla or whatever. Godzilla, for whatever reason, is crawling on all fours, even though he sticks out like a sore thumb. But I was like, he's hiding from him. And I was like, when he was on the top, I was like, where his hand is holding the building, I was like, that's like, his hand is the size of, like, the original King Kong's body. So that's why I was like, yo, like, this would not work. And, like, if King Kong was his normal size, this fight would just not happen. So that's why I was like, damn. That's why the size comparison popped in my head when I saw that. I was like, because the other Kong, if he fell from that height, he would die. But this Kong could leap off of that building and, like, land perfectly fine, which I thought was, like, I like the idea of scope in these monster movies because, like, you have to compare it to, like, realistic standards, even though it's not realistic. So that's kind of why it hit me.
I just imagined Godzilla and King Kong, like, running towards each other and, like, the camera cutting back and forth. And then it just stays on Godzilla. And then he checks his foot and it's King Kong on his foot.
That'd be fun. No, I mean, I was just thinking, like, I think one of the biggest testaments to the size comparison is, like, in the '05 version, I think Naomi Watts has, like, her head sticking out of, like, the top of Kong's hand and her legs sticking out of the bottom. And then with Brie Larson, she looks like a Tic Tac in Kong's hand. And
then with Gia, like, his whole finger is bigger than Gia's whole body when she tries to touch his finger.
Yeah, like, significantly.
Yeah.
Like, his fingernail is bigger than her whole body.
I was wondering how he even physically feels her touching his finger there.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, it probably feels like a
she's
tickle.
so tiny. Yeah.
I was like, what if I thought he was going to push her over mistakenly. I was like, what if he just know when he's like...
I know, like, when...
How does he know when you can't see her past his hand? Like,
right. I hadn't thought of that, but yeah. I don't know. I probably shouldn't dig too much into the science of that.
Yeah.
I also don't know how the girl got away off this, like, military ship onto the base area with no one noticing or stopping her. It's just, like, this deaf girl wandering, and she's like, all right, I'm here now. I'm out in the front, and everyone's like, oh, shit, she's down there? And I'm like, you guys are the worst government officials ever, and they sent you to take care of Kong and get Godzilla.
Like,
yeah, or with the Goonies going around the military bases, like, how did nobody see them in the sacrifice pit? Like, remember when they brought the Skullcrawler out to test Mechagodzilla? How did only the Skullcrawler saw them?
I don't even know, like, why they walk. Like, when you walk into that building, they walked into the middle of the darkness. I'm like, why would you do that? Like, you know, like, the ceiling is abnormally high. Like, you know what that room is for. Like, come on. But you know, it's an interesting movie, right? You gotta add conflict.
Humans.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice if, like, you don't have to, like, be yelling at the humans to be smarter when the conflict comes up, but you know, they seem to be leaning on the stupidity of their characters in a lot of cases.
Yeah, like, why he never unhooked? He saw Godzilla coming, everyone's dying, and he's like, no, why would we unhook Kong? No. And then he decides after the ship is flipped to unhook him. And I'm like, imagine if you did that 5 seconds ago.
Yeah. And, like, the mom and the girl ran to, like, that solo room knowing the ship was going to flip over, and, like, then he got locked in there. I was like, why would you even put yourself in that predicament, bro? Like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Still, I said this earlier in the podcast. I have to repeat myself and say it again. They acknowledged the fact that if they went on ship, that Godzilla was going to come. They acknowledged that fact, and they still did it. Like, that's mind-blowing to me, man. It's a cool fight scene. Don't get me wrong, bro, but that's mind-blowing.
They said they avoided all of his routes.
Yeah. Like it's the
they
ocean.
sense each other. Like, this is beyond human comprehension.
Yeah, also, it's like, that's
knows.
Also, like, when he shows up, that's their first idea. They're like, how's Kong in the air? Like, come on, y'all didn't think of that before?
Like, come on, man. Like, also, how did they, like,
paid
drug
a lot
him?
of money for these battleships. Nobody thought of that.
One thing I was wondering is, how do they manage to drug Kong and keep him asleep that long, and then manage to move him, flip him over, put him on a boat, put him in a helicopter? Like, that is mind-blowing to me. Get him out of, like,
there's not enough chloroform in the damn world.
Like, it's funny. Like, you notice every time they moved and they never showed it. They just always showed Kong knocked out, snoring, being carried away. They never showed that. I thought it was funny to me.
Yeah.
They briefly showed like his sedation levels, but where is that coming from, and how does that keep getting
Right, they don't have
refueled?
like big ass IVs hooked up to him or anything like that.
Right, unless it's in the chains, but even then, like, what are those hooked up to? Because it's not going through the chains. It's not like a wire within the chains. Like,
And then coordinating 12 helicopters to lay a net on him and carry him across the Arctic. Yeah, must have been really fun.
Yeah. But see, they should have just done that to begin with.
Yeah, man, that's what I'm saying, bro.
Yeah.
Still, fun movie. I had a blast. Like I knew what this movie was gonna be. Terrible plot, great fighting. I came in there, I got what I wanted. I'm satisfied. I just don't know. I don't know where they're gonna go from here. That's the thing. Like, this is what they were setting up since 2014. So I don't know where they're gonna go from here. I do know you guys are gonna all sigh at this, but I do know that, like, in the last Godzilla movie, they dropped the oxygen neutralizer bomb or whatever. I forget what the terminology was, but it was oxygen neutralizer, I'll say. And apparently that destroyed a colony of crustaceans and created a monster named Destroyer in the original Godzilla movies.
oh,
Yeah, so like they set him up in that previous movie, but like it's gonna take time for him to like formulate and become big, obviously. So I think that's where they're gonna go. But right now, there's no future plans, and honestly, I'm okay with no new movies. I don't know where else you can go from here. I would like to see a Hollow Earth movie with Kong, but that's about as far as I would go. Because a Hollow Earth was a really tease, and I think they could be really interesting.
dude, I want to see all the creatures down there. All we got to see was the bat looking.
And the King
Stingray
Cobra things. The
things.
King Cobras were kind of cool.
Yeah, be swarming.
Yeah. Ripped off his head and drank his blood.
Yeah, that was brutal.
I feel like they've kind of maybe written themselves into a corner, though, because, like, you know, if this is supposed to be, like, the Warner Brothers response to the MCU of, like, doing a crossover, I feel like they did the wrong order. They should have done Godzilla versus Kong and then King of the Monsters, where they bring out, like, whoa, here's all the monsters all at once.
Absolutely.
But then
Like-
you would have to come up with an excuse as to why King Kong isn't there. Like, why doesn't Godzilla just call King Kong and they team up on everybody?
Right.
I would have
know
watched
what the
that
MCU
movie.
is.
I would have watched the hell out of that movie if that's what King of Monsters was.
Evan, were you saying that Kong would be in the King of the Monsters movie? That's what you were implying.
Well, yeah, I feel like it makes just in terms of, like, if you want to get progressively bigger, you know, if you want more monsters later, so let's have Godzilla versus Kong early. You know, I know people aren't happy with the DCEU, but I think it was still the right move to do Batman versus Superman and then Justice League. Like,
Absolutely.
you're progressively getting more. We got the inverse with this, where it's like King of the Monsters, there's like 5 big featured ones and they tease a whole bunch more. This one we've got 2 plus maybe the King Cobra thing and then Mechagodzilla. It felt like they were scaling down. So, I mean, most of those other monsters are still alive, but we didn't get any indication.
I want to
of
see
where they
more
were.
from them. Like, I'm not familiar with all of Godzilla's rogues gallery, but I want to know more. Like, it was like a volcanic one and all this other stuff.
Right, because Rodan is still is Rodan still alive at the end of King of Monsters? I don't remember if he died.
Yeah.
And then they had like that
really.
woolly mammoth, the spider thing,
Yeah.
all that were
Some
bowing
I've
to
never even
Godzilla.
seen before. Yeah.
Where were they
I-
in this?
I think those guys. My theory was they came from the Hollow Earth, but I cannot prove that because, like, I don't know who those things. I don't recognize any of them. But my
How did
issue
they get
with
back?
I don't know. My issue is like them. Well, they came from underground, most of them. But my issue is like they were all It's like, what's the term? Is it Schwarzenegger's gun or whatever it is? Like, don't have the gun go. Like, don't show a gun.
Chekhov's gun, yeah.
Chekhov's gun, yeah. Like, don't show a gun. If you show a gun, it better go off by Act 3. Like, you showed all these monsters, and then like they all went away and did nothing. Like, it was just to
Right.
show that they were here. I think that was it. I was like, come on, man. All that CGI.
They were
for-
glorified cameos.
I think the question there is like, is this Act 3? Because if it is, then yeah, they blew it. But if there's a little more to come, then maybe they can still deliver on that. But even in this,
wonder
like, if Godzilla like won the
Yeah.
respect of all the rest of them, why can't he call up the woolly mammoth to like come bum rush Kong at some
There we
point?
go.
Right.
Oh, he probably. I could take Kong myself. Oh, this is light work. This is just breakfast, bro. I got it. Like,
Yeah, I mean, he could take him by himself, but and I guess that would kind of subvert him being the alpha if he has to call in
Yeah.
help. But like, even so, you know, maybe just have him be there as backup, like, you know,
Absolutely,
my
yeah.
second. Colin Mothra, or
Right, where
Mothra
was
died,
she?
I think.
She's
I think
like,
Mothra died. Yeah.
I
did
think they
hear-
said
Right, she's
she
in
like has
another
an
egg or something,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah.
I wonder if behind the scenes Godzilla and like King Kong had like beef on set. I'm sorry, that was stupid.
Yo, they said the director had a 5-hour cut of this movie.
Oh
What?
no! Please, you're joking. You're joking.
I'm gonna find the article and put in the group chat, the Skype chat right now.
No,
Yeah, sorry.
no.
Or sorry, he has enough footage for 5 hours. It's not necessarily a 5-hour cut, but he has enough footage, and that means two different things.
Well, if this is
Still.
what they kept in, I bet their deleted scenes are probably really extraneous, would be my guess.
Yeah.
More humans. It's all human
Yeah,
footage.
more Goonies. Kyle Chandler's off, like, I don't even know what. We didn't even, like, he wasn't grieving his wife or anything. I bet they have some deleted scenes with that. So,
Yeah.
I would think that.
I would
came
hope
up.
so.
Or villain origins for the Lex Luthor and the Mecha Godzilla weirdo.
Yeah. The thing I saw, this is not entirely related, but I remember early when the trailers came out, I saw like someone on Twitter being like, guys, we know how this ends, right? Kong like is about to crack down on Godzilla and he says, save Mothra. And then he's like, why'd you say that name? And that's how, and then they go fight whoever. No. I would have kind of loved if they did that, but also like, I just love that somebody called that out. Would have been mad funny.
I would have left the theater.
Well, I mean, you would have. They would have already gotten your money in most of your time, so
Yeah.
I don't know if they would
Very
have cared
much so.
at that point.
How did we feel about Kong floating into his like trippy finger pointy moment with like the rocks? I loved that
That was
part.
cool.
Oh,
so cool.
when he like jumped up to the rock that looked like a
Upside
hand.
Yeah,
down?
yeah, and he touches the finger and everything, and he's
That
just
was
like floating
awesome.
up. I really enjoyed that part.
I love seeing different sci-fi, like even though this was like still Earth, like it felt like a sci-fi world within Earth, which I guess is the whole point. So seeing that whole scene with the rocks floating and then the upside down other side of it, that was awesome.
That was kind of cool. I couldn't get over the fact that the sun was shining down there, though. Like,
Oh no,
I-
Evan, you just ruined the movie for me, dude.
Sorry,
What the
I
hell?
couldn't get over that the whole time. I know I should be suspending my disbelief way beyond that, but I couldn't get over it.
Now you got me questioning like the logic of this movie. I can believe Godzilla and King Kong existing, but the sun shining in the middle of the Earth? Come on, man. Come on.
That's where it lost me too. I do like that shot you're talking about though, David. Like when he jumps up to the hand. That was actually kind of cool.
Where is the sunlight coming from? I'm having an existential crisis over this right now.
I want to know too. Like, is it actually the sun? And like, this raises many questions.
Oh no.
I'm imagining it like the Game of Thrones intro, where like it seems like the world is like around that sun thing in the middle, and like maybe that's what it is. Like Hollow Earth has
It's
like
not
the sun
it can't
in
be the
middle.
core
Maybe it could though. Like I don't know.
because it's all hollow. So, oh god.
I saw something today where people were like, now somebody's gonna come up with like, people are gonna actually take like Hollow Earth as like a flat Earth style conspiracy theory.
Oh please no.
I don't want it to happen either, but 30 years down the line, I wouldn't be shocked to see ads for the Church of the Hollow Earth.
Yeah, no, I'm just. Yeah, that's not far fetched at all.
I wish it were, but
This is. Yeah.
it's probably pretty possible.
Yeah.
So we'll just run through the boilerplate real quick then. Our upcoming episodes, we have the next HBO Max release, Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
And then after that, we're going to do Get Out. We have merchandise with the logo. There's going to be a link to the products in the show notes. They're all on Zazzle. We have a Patreon with episodes on the Raimi Spider-Man trilogy and Tenet and more to come. Our logo is by Kelsey Hendry. You can check out our YouTube channel. We just added, since the last podcast, we added a new video essay on Curse of the Black Pearl. So that's up there if you haven't seen that yet. You can follow the show on Twitter at INTAnalysis18. I'm on Twitter at Davos Watson. And where can people find all of you?
I'm on Twitter at Jelani T. Kelly, Instagram at BasePhoenix, and twitch.tv/JBasePhoenix.
Ahsan?
Yeah, y'all can find me outside in the streets. When y'all see me, just give me a head nod. I'll nod back.
Doing that again.
Catch me. Y'all see me outside. I'll see you. I'll dap y'all up.
All right.
I think they'll recognize your voice.
Yeah, if you're vaccinated, see me in the streets. Otherwise, Instagram at David's Insta account.
We'll have links to those in the show notes, so if you want to check those out, they will be there. All right, if that's all, then thank you for listening, and we'll see all of you next time.
Thank you both for joining the show today, too.
Thank you both for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, it was really fun talking with y'all.
Yeah, for real.
Cool.
All right. Peace.